All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Michael Twyman, a board certified cardiologist in St. Louis, Missouri. I started Apollo Cardiology in the summer of 2019 to focus on heart attack and stroke prevention after becoming the biohacking cardiologist in 2017 when I realized that circadian rhythms were the key to longevity. Tonight's talk is going to be about exercise for longevity. The caveats are I'm not an exercise physiologist or professional athlete. My highest level of achievement in exercise was playing lacrosse in college in a team that I started. And that's probably the most fit I was in those days. Got very unfit in the medical school world when I was mostly focused on my training and really ignored my body for longer than I wanted to. And now I'm back to being the same way I was in high school and more fit than I was before I went into the military a few years ago. So tonight's talk going to be about exercising for longevity. I can tell you I'm somewhat of a lazy exerciser. I'd rather not do hours and hours of cardio. And I'll tell you, you don't necessarily need to do that for longevity. You know, if you're a pro athlete or you need peak performance type of tips, this isn't the talk tonight. We'll do those type of talks in the future. Maybe we'll talk about VO2 max and lactate threshold testing. Tonight's more going to be the basics on, what kind of cardio do you truly need to do. And of course, there's strength training, cardio, flexibility, and balance training. You need to do all of them to have optimal health because it's no good having a healthy heart and healthy muscles if you fall down and break your hip when you're 70, 80 years old. So you need them all. But tonight's focus is mostly going to be on cardio. But shout out for the resistance. For the patients that see me in the office, it is key. You need to do resistance training. You need your muscle mass to age well. Your muscles, your brain, your heart are the places with the most mitochondria. The mitochondria, wherever they break, is where you get your chronic diseases. And your skeletal muscle burns approximately 80% of your glucose. So if you don't want to be insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, or diabetic, you need to exercise your muscles with something that stimulates them more than just walking. So tonight's focus is mostly going to be on cardio. I've probably had a revelation on how much cardio you need to do a few weeks ago. For the past couple of years, I've been talking much more about HIIT training, or that I was a cardiologist that wasn't so interested in chronic cardio, because most people were doing chronic cardio probably inappropriately, just going at the wrong speeds, and not getting the benefit out of it, or they weren't measuring exactly what their heart rates were, so they didn't know if they were optimizing mitochondrial function. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit more about zone 2 training. Don't worry if you don't understand that. I didn't understand it a few weeks ago. We'll go through the basics. If you want that kind of more of the deep dive, I listened to a podcast 3 times over a 2-hour-long podcast. It was with Dr. Peter Attia and Dr. San Milan. The podcast was back in December of 2019. I believe it was number episode 85. And it's all about how to optimize zone 2 training. So what do you need to know for zone training for cardio is you need to know some heart rates. And fortunately, I'm a cardiologist, so I can kind of teach you guys that. So you want to know what your baseline heart rate is. And you can get that if you have a wearable, a Fitbit, an Oura Ring, Apple Watch, get a couple of days worth of what your baseline resting heart rate is. If you don't have a device like that, you can measure your pulse at your wrist, count it out for 15 seconds times by 4, or measure it out for the full minute and get a baseline. Then you're going to know what your peak heart rates are. And your peak heart rates can be obtained in different ways. One of the ways you can do it is doing a maximal exercise stress test under supervision. You can also do it like a VO2 max exercise testing in a gym with a personal trainer. Those are probably the preferred ways because you'll actually get your true maximal heart rate. A very rough estimate is 220 minus your age, but it can be off 10 to 20 points either way, but it gives you a rough estimate if you don't have any other measurements for it. I'm going to recommend later, that you consider getting a heart rate monitor strap. I personally use a Polar H7. I think they have now a Polar H10, a little bit more updated. But if you have one of these monitors, then you can actually do the zone training much more effectively. So I was telling people earlier, I recently acquired a Peloton bike to do a little bit more interval training and now more zone 2 training at home. And today I did an FTP session. The FTP session is kind of a maximal stress test essentially on a bike, figure out your peak wattage. This was my second one. I'm not a major cyclist in any means, but I definitely improved since the first time I took this test a couple of weeks ago. But after 20 minutes, you're either going to probably puke or you're just going to lay on the floor for a while recovering because you're going all out. And I obtained my maximal heart rate. It's a little bit less than it was a couple of weeks ago, but my maximal heart rate was 198. That's much higher than my calculated heart rate. My calculated heart rate is probably in the 170s. my calculated heart rate's in the 170s. So, biologically, I may be 44. There's some testing that we'll be talking about in the next few weeks to really figure out what your longevity is. It's a very interesting test, your DNA methylation, something called the Horvath clock. You can also check your telomeres, which I've done previously. You can also check your vascular age with calcium scores and carotid scans. So it gives you a kind of a three-dimensional true age versus what your birthday candle age is. But anyway, my maximal heart rate's higher than what my predictor was. So again, it could be 10 to 20 points off either way. Oh, having more issues with Instagram, but I will keep going here. Let's see if I can at least share this one. Well, if not, I'll just upload this one later to Instagram. Not sure what's going on with Instagram tonight, so let's keep going. So maximal heart rate, once you got it, and you have your minimum heart rate, that's kind of your heart rate zones that you're going to be in between. Zone 2 is generally between 60 and 70% of your maximal heart rate. And that's where you're going to get the maximal benefit for optimize your mitochondrial function. So your mitochondria, they want to be hybrids. They can burn fat, they can burn sugar for fuel. The fat is burnt at the lower intensities, the sugar is burned at the higher intensities. And I previously was more interested in doing HIIT training, going fast and slow, which will train the mitochondria to burn sugar effectively, but not necessarily burn fat effectively. And if you're trying to lose weight or optimize your mitochondria for longevity, it's really about the slower intensity where the mitochondria and the type 1 muscle fibers are more activated. So you have type 1 muscle fibers and type 2 muscle fibers. The type 1 are the slow twitch muscles. The type 2 are the fast twitch muscles. And it's basically how fast do those muscles fatigue. The slow twitch can burn fat all day long as you're not going too fast. After you go too fast, the slow twitch, have to upgrade to the fast twitch to start burning glucose for energy. But anybody who's ever done any HIIT training or really fast sprinting, eventually hits that wall or bonks, and they always say, "Oh, it's high lactate." Doing that, lactate plays a role, but it's not the lactate that's necessarily doing it. It's that there's high hydrogen, and then your acid levels go. You get acidotic, and then the muscles don't contract well, and then you kind of will have to slow down. But the more efficient you are, you'll actually recycle that lactate from the fast twitch to the slow twitch, and the faster you can clear that, the better you do. So like elite cyclists and runners are very effective at recycling lactate. But for the average weekend warrior and average longevity person, you don't necessarily have to worry about that part as much. But it's more about doing enough zone 2 training. And the amount of zone 2 training, if you're just starting out, you're probably going to recommend doing at least 80% of your exercise in zone 2, and then maybe only doing 20% in that fast HIIT type training. If you're already a fit individual, maybe you only need to do 2 days a week and HIIT training for kind of a maintenance phase. But if you're a sicker person, more is probably better. And the good part is it's not something that is super strenuous. Again, it's probably 60 to 70% of your maximal heart rate. If you don't have those kind of measurements, you can kind of go by your preserved exertion scale, which would be basically a 5 out of 10. So shouldn't be overly problematic to hit a 5 out of 10. It should still be at a pace where you could easily hold a conversation all day long. If it's if you're going fast enough, you start getting breathless, you need to slow down the speed or the incline or whatever else you're doing to try to pull the intensity back down. And then the duration, it really depends. I've seen what some of these guys are doing. They're between 45 minutes and an hour and a half per session. That seems like a lot, but if you're really trying to reverse a chronic disease, it may take that much to really reboot your mitochondrial function. That zone 2 training trains those weaker mitochondria to check out by autophagy and apoptosis, and then the good mitochondria, they get stronger, more fuel efficient, and they burn fat more effectively. So it may just take longer to reboot those. It may take months to reboot them. But the good news is that you're not laying over breathless. Feel like you're going to throw up after that type of exercise. So I think that was the kind of the main gist I wanted to chat about tonight was zone training. A little bit different than I was doing personally for myself and just the past few weeks, and something that I'm going to be talking more about in the next few few weeks in these sessions. Definitely talk about longevity. We'll be talking about photobiomodulation, other biohacking topics. But and I'm getting more and more questions about kind of what exercise I personally do and what I'd recommend for patients to do. So I do thank you guys for your attention tonight. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I don't know if it's whatever the weather in St. Louis is doing, but I hope you guys are doing well, and I'll open up to any questions you have.
Dr. Twyman?
Yes, sir.
The podcast that you referred to, can you give a little more information on finding that?
It's Peter Attia Drive. Attia spelled A-T-T-I-A. And it was episode 85.
Peter Attia Drive, like driving a car?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Well, the people that got the cameras out, I can see they got red lights on, they got blue blockers, so that's usually a good sign. The question is about the time frame of exercise. Typically 4 days a week is probably gonna put you on a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday split. I'm not up to that much time at this point. I was out of town this weekend, so I did take some days off, and I wanted to do this FTP study today, and I didn't want to be burnt out for it. But typically, I usually do something 6 days a week. For the resistance training, currently I'm doing something called the X3 bar. It's a variable resistance band. I had it pre-COVID. It's basically a all-encompassing strength resistance machine that you can have at home that fits in a backpack. So I do that 6 days a week, and then the cardio stuff. I got a Peloton bike, about a month ago, and I'm starting to build up my base miles on it. But I'm really focusing on the zone 2 training after I really realized the importance for improving the slow twitch muscles' ability to clear lactate. So there's something that on the VO2 max study you can see where people's zone 2 will slip into zone 3 when they start having to burn more glucose for energy. But most people aren't going to do that kind of advanced testing, so you kind of go more by heart rate, which correlates fairly well, and also the perceived exertion scale correlates pretty well. But there will be a way ultimately that I don't know exactly when I'll get it launched up at Apollo, but I would like to be able to do the VO2 max studies, and then I could tell patients exactly like how healthy the mitochondria are then. Most of the time it's inferred more by your blood work and what your story is, but if you do a kind of a VO2 max, you'll be able to tell people exactly.
Hi, Dr. Twyman.
Hello.
Does the exercise, the 45 minutes to an hour and a half, have to be done consecutively all at one time, or could you split it like morning, afternoon? Is it per day that recommended time is, and can it be done? Does it have to be done all at once?
I don't think necessarily it has to be done all at once, but I think most people that really purport the benefit, they all do it in one setting, because you do have to kind of cool, do a warm up, hit it, and then cool down. And so if you're doing, 45 minutes and doing cool down minute, you're going to end up doing 2 hours of it instead of just doing it all at once. So personally, I don't think I'm ever going to get up to an hour and a half sessions unless I was training for a race or something like that. But I'm likely to increase some of my zone 2 stuff to at least 45-minute sessions, because I usually am between 30 minutes, and 40 minutes for the Peloton, but I'm also doing the resistance training for 15, 20 minutes a day. So, and like I said, I'm somewhat of a lazy exerciser. I don't want to do hours and hours a day of exercise. So I will kind of compress it down a little bit, but I will be doing more days of the slower training versus more of the sprint work.
And I'm sorry if I missed it, but does that recommended for optimal mitochondrial function, was that every day or
It, it,
so many
it,
days a week?
it depends on, where people's baseline of exercise is. If they're just a beginning exerciser, they probably need 4 days a week for quite a while. If you're somebody who's well trained and you just need to maintain, you probably only need 2 days a week of that type of training. But it's going to be, a combination of strength training, cardio training, balance training, flexibility training. You know, um, you got to kind of get it all in for optimal. But for mitochondrial function, it's mostly the zone 2 training, and doing enough resistance training to have the muscle mass to burn the glucose and fats effectively. So, I mean, the cardiology, general guidelines is 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous exercise a week. For the most part, 2.5 to 5 hours a week is kind of the sweet zone. But I do have some patients that have, more long distance goals. They want to be marathon runners or doing endurance events. That's more of a skill versus something that's really necessarily long-term healthy for the heart. If you do too much exercise, you put your body under too much stress and don't let it recover, you end up wearing parts out faster. So people who do too much endurance exercise end up with atrial fibrillation, coronary calcifications. They end up with cardiac fibrosis. So too much exercise is not good either. So typically 2.5 to 5 hours a week is the kind of the sweet spot. So question about dancing or jump rope. All activity is going to be good, and it depends on what your physical activity levels are when you do those activities. So, if you're just beginning out, jump roping is probably going to be very, very challenging. If you're a professional boxer, jump roping is probably not that difficult. So it's really on your perceived exertion scale. 5 out of 10 should be able to hold a conversation. And then the muscle strength training is 2 to 3 days a week. Question, am I doing office visits or telemedicine consult for customized exercise programs? That's the first time I've actually been asked about it. I'm not truly opposed to it, but I'm definitely not an exercise physiologist or a physical therapist who knows how to develop programs around people's limitations or injuries. I can kind of give overall recommendations for kind of cardiovascular benefits and overall strength benefits, but the actual programs of what exercises to do, that's best left to the professionals for that part. In the future, I hope to have a kind of peak performance center where I would have the VO2 max gear. It would be a bicycle, and you'd have a breath analyzer, and we could actually tell you exactly your peak oxygen capacity and your lactate thresholds, and we could actually do it in a monitored situation. There's also some interesting biohacking health optimization gear. There's a Carol bike that is really probably the best thing for HIIT training. Some called the Vasper that does compression, as well as cryotherapy or cold therapy with exercise. So it increases your lactate thresholds. So those are things I'm interested in potentially doing at Apollo or another type of biohacking center in St. Louis once there's enough critical mass of people interested in that type of activity. All right. Well, I usually try to keep these about 30 minutes or so, so I do want to respect your guys' time. I appreciate you guys tuning in to the Dr. Twyman call-in show tonight. It'll be the same time, same place next week, Mondays at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. Next week's topic is to be determined. I've done, a month worth of photoball modulation. Last week, talked more about the 3 cardiovascular screening tests that I look at for people who want to know what their true risk of a heart attack is. Tonight was exercise. Potentially next week, I'll do something about nutrition. It's been a little while since I've talked about nutrition. So, but again, thank you guys for joining tonight. And if you have any questions, just feel free to shoot me an email or, look us up on our website and we'll take care of it. So, but see you guys again next week. Take care. Bye.